Hi, in this video we are going to learn about Terraform. Have you ever created resources manually in Azure, AWS or Google and thought, man, there should be an easier way to do this? Or even worse, have you ever deployed something and realized you missed one tiny configuration and asked yourself, I've done this 100 times, why did I miss this? Yes, we have all been there in that situation where we click 30 different buttons to deploy a resource, right? So this is where the Terraform comes in and says,
Hi, I am Terraform. Don't click buttons anymore. You just hand me the instructions. I'll go and build your entire infrastructure, whether it may be servers, networks, or databases, anything for you.
but I'm very curious and I'll ask Terraform how you're actually doing that. By end of the series, you will know exactly what Terraform is, why it solves the biggest headache in cloud computing, and 4 magical commands you need to get started with. Before we talk about Terraform, we have to talk about the problem. Imagine you want to create a server. If you are using Azure, you need to learn bicep or ARM templates. If you move to AWS, then CloudFormation. Google Cloud, that's totally different tool again. Basically, every cloud speaks different language. Imagine trying to learn French, Spanish, or German just to order a coffee. It's exhausting, right? So, this is why Terraform is a lifesaver. Terraform is an infrastructure as code, also known as IAC, that lets us manage entire components on cloud platforms and other services. So basically, Terraform says, hey, don't learn 5 different languages, just learn me. It acts as a universal translator. You write your infrastructure in Terraform code, which is super easy to read, and Terraform handles the messy work, which is talking to different providers. Whether you are in dev, test, production, you use same exact code. Okay, so how does this magic happen? It all starts with something called providers. Think of provider as a translator. Terraform core actually doesn't know how to build a Azure server. It's just a brain. The provider is a plugin that knows how to talk to Azure. So you'll tell Terraform, I want a server. The Azure provider translates that into API call that Azure can understand. Without providers, Terraform is just a tool with no hands. And next comes the important and most sensitive thing, that is called state file. This is the brain of the Terraform, we can say. It keeps a list of everything it has created. If you ask Terraform to create a server, first it checks this file. If this file says, hey, we already created the resource yesterday, Terraform does nothing. It's smart, right? It does not create duplicates. Without state file, Terraform would be like a blind. It won't just keep creating new resources over and over again. So how do I actually use Terraform? It really comes down to just 4 magical commands. First is Terraform init. Think of it this as packing your bags. You're telling Terraform, hey, I'm about to use AWS. Please go ahead and download plugins I need. You usually run this just once at the start. Second is Terraform plan. This is a safety check. Terraform looks at your code and tells you, okay, if you say yes, I'm going to create this 3 server and delete 1 database. It doesn't actually do anything in the actual environment. It just shows you the plan so you don't delete accidentally anything in production. And third one is Terraform apply. This is a green button. You review the plan and type yes, and Terraform goes to do its work. It builds your infrastructure for real. And fourth one is Terraform destroy, and it looks at the state file, finds everything that you built and deletes it all. One command and everything is gone. Boom. Now let's go and see how this commands are actually working. Now I will open a Visual Studio Code. Here I have a show directory with presentation as a subdirectory. So I'll create a new folder, tf. In this tf folder, I'll create a new file which is main.tf. which is definitely required, and we can see it as a heart of a Terraform. So now let's create a simple resource in Azure and see how this Terraform commands are actually working. So we can create a virtual machine, but virtual machine is dependent with disks, IP, and VNet configuration. To deploy a virtual machine, we need to deploy all these resources which are dependent. So just to see, now we're just seeing how this command's actually working, right? So I'll just deploy a resource group in Azure and I'll perform these commands, and let's see how the state file is configuring and how these plugins are configuring, how these things are actually working by just deploying a resource group in Azure. And now I'll go to Azure portal. No, I'll go to this Terraform portal. Okay, here we have a registry, right? In this Terraform registry, we can find this code and resource details or Terraform code, syntax, everything in this registry for any providers or any tools which Terraform is supported. So I have browse providers. I'll click on Azure because we plan to create a resource group in Azure. And in the right side, we can see a use provider, right? So I'll click on use provider. I'll copy this code. Here we have a syntax, right? So I'll copy this syntax and I'll put it in my main.tf. Okay, done. And in this provider, we have Azure RM. And here we have configuration options. Here we need to give a features. This is much required. I'll get this empty. And now this provider we have defined, and we have defined Terraform details, and we have defined Azure RM version. So it will download Azure RM plugin, required plugins with this particular specified version. Now we want a code, Terraform code for deploying a resource group, right? So I'll go here and type resource group Terraform code. Here we have Azure RM resource group. I'll click on it. Here we'll get the code resource, and we have the syntax. I'll copy this, I'll paste it in here. Okay, in this code what we have a resource which is specifying to particular resource group, and we have an example. This is an ID for this particular resource. So it's not an ID which is related to Azure, it is an ID which is particularly related to this Terraform. So I can change this example to anything like RG or RG1 or RG2 or something like that, to give a particular ID to this resource. Because if we want to deploy multiple resource group, so the code is same, right? So this particular syntax is same even if you are creating n number of resource groups. So how can you differentiate between two resource group? That is with this ID. So I can duplicate this code. I'll copy this and I'll paste this here, but I'll just change this particular ID RG2 from RG3. Now Terraform thinks these are two different resources and it will not duplicate, and we can keep this on loop also. So we can not, rather specifying this multiple times, rather duplicating this multiple times, we can just keep it on loop, and we can create a number of resource groups or a number of resources that we want. And other two parameters are name and location. Name is the resource group name which we want to deploy in Azure. I'm just giving Cloudwind 1 maybe, and for this I'll give Cloudwind 2. So I have given a Terraform version, providers defined, resources are defined. Now I want to build a authentication or a gateway between this Terraform and Azure, right? How I can do that? I'll just save this and I'll open terminal. So in terminal I need to log into Azure using AC login. I'll do that using AC login. Use device code. I'll copy this URL. I'll copy this access. this code, enter, next, yes, continue. Okay, so for this terminal authentication is done to this particular show subscription. I'll just hit enter. Okay, now authentication is done, and we need to specify here. If you see, I have two subscriptions for my directory or my tenant, right? So here I have a specified particular subscription, so I need to give it in the Azure providers as well, if possible, that Terraform can know which subscription it need to deploy this particular resources. So there's a particular parameter that we can give in Azure RM, which is subscription ID. Subscription underscore ID equal to, I'll get here, I'll go to my Azure portal, subscriptions, I'll give it here. Okay, I'll save it. Done. Now everything is specified. I can go ahead and use that 4 magical commands. So first one is Terraform init. Okay, we are in a different directory. We're in Azure, so I need to move to TF. Okay, now I'll give Terraform init. Okay, now if you see, it's downloading all the required plugins from Azure portal, required plugins for connecting to Azure portal. Terraform init is done. It downloaded all the required plugins. Here if you see, we have, it's automatically created .terraform folder and .terraform.log.hcl. So these two things are newly created after we are doing this Terraform init. So these things have all the required details, plugin details related to Azure RM. Now the second command is Terraform plan, right? Terraform plan. Enter. So Terraform plan is done. So if we see Terraform plan, it is giving all the blueprint of the things that it is going to create, delete or modify. If we see the overview, the plan is showing that 2 resources are going to be add and 0 to destroy and 0 to change, because we are creating 2 resource group which is not present in my Azure subscription. So it will add 2 resources. And next command is Terraform apply. Enter. It will take some time. Okay. Enter a value. Yes, I'm giving a green signal to create those 2 resources. When we are working in pipelines or in any automation thing, we can avoid this pop-up by giving some parameters, and it will automatically apply without asking this pop-up enter a value. Oh, we can see the logs that Azure resource group is creating, still creating. So what it is doing, this Terraform is trying to connect with the Azure portal using the API that it is downloaded from the Azure RM provider plugins. Oh, apply is completed. Now we can see 2 resources has been added, 0 destroyed and 0 changed. I'll go to Azure portal and I'll go to resource groups. So here I can see CloudWin 1 and CloudWin 2. 2 resource groups have been created, and there are no resources in this resource groups because we are not specified anything. So no resources has been created except this particular resource groups. And next command is Terraform destroy. If we see here, so these particular .terraform is created when we did Terraform init. which is storing this Terraform init files and this terraform.tf state. This is called tf state file. This is the brain of this particular entire Terraform. It will store all the details which we created using Terraform command. So, and if you see, there are other resource groups which I have created. For example, rag implementation. This particular resource group details will not be there in this Terraform state file because that resources are not created using Terraform. So those details will not be here in Terraform state file. If we want to manage those things using Terraform, we can import those resources to Terraform using import command. That's a different concept. I'll explain in coming videos. And if we see this Terraform state file, what it is containing, it is in JSON format, which is containing the resources details, resource group details, which is ID subscription, resource CloudWin 1 and CloudWin 2. It only have two resource group details. If I try to do plan again, I'll do plan again. I'll give Terraform plan. Okay, see, after giving Terraform plan, it is showing no changes to this infrastructure because those things are because Terraform plan will check the tf state file whether it has this resource details or not, and it will check yes, the resource details are present, and it will reflect no changes are required, and it will not make any changes to this present infrastructure, and it will not create any duplicate resource groups as well. And what's the next command? Terraform destroy. Oh, okay, if we see the destroy logs, see, will be destroyed. It is specifying that particular resources will be destroyed. It will destroy entire resources which is present in this tf state. I'll give yes. Okay, done. Destroy is completed. It created two resources, and after destroy, it removed entire two resources from the Azure portal. So I'll go to Azure portal. Here we have CloudWin, and I'll try to refresh it. Resource not found. And if I go to resource groups also, we can't find those two. We can't see, we don't find those two particular resource group which we created using Terraform. Other resource group, it doesn't touch, Terraform doesn't touch, which is not present in tf state. And if I go to terraform.tf, see, there's nothing. It's just having default parameters, default or predefined parameters. Except from that, we don't have any residuals which is related to particular resources. And it's also created backup file. So here we have a backup state file. So if we want, we can just replace and work with this tf state file, or else we can just leave it. That's it, guys. I hope you understood a basic information about Terraform. In coming videos, in coming series, we can just discuss about how we are going to use this Terraform in Azure DevOps pipeline, how we can manage multiple resources, and how we can import this manually created resources into Terraform state file or into Terraform, and how we can install this Terraform in Azure agents while we are working on DevOps pipelines, or and how we can back up this state file in storage accounts and give logs to that state file, backing up this state files. So we can see all these types of